there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Was going to have a nice edited video for you. I'm working on a top 10 list of cards I want to brew around with Rivals of Ixalan, as well as an Etali commander deck from the new Rivals of Ixalan. But I don't want to also break my streak of having a video out, at least one video out for 2018. So I thought I'd at least do a deck tech of one of my commander decks that I love. And I guess going into the Etali, why I like Etali so much from the new Rivals of Ixalan, it's a 6 mana a dinosaur, 2 red and 4 colorless. Whenever it attacks, each player exiles a top card of their library, and you can cast those cards without paying their mana cost. So the thing I like about Etali is it's a card that's okay in 1 versus 1. Where it really shines is when you have multi-player game, especially like Commander. A lot of times Commander, the converted mana cost of cards is a lot higher because you have time to cast things and a lot of degenerate ways to cast some of these cards that would never see the daylight in a constructed, like a Legacy of Vintage, a modern standard type format. And so Etali even gets better because of that, because you can get some crazy cards off the top of people's libraries for it. So in the spirit of Etali, I'm going to show you a card that is very similar to, that's not very strong in a 1 versus 1 type setting, but is incredibly strong in a multiplayer format, and especially in Commander. In fact, the more players, the merrier. I don't know if you play your traditional 4-man pods, but sometimes our Commander games get up to 7 players. And usually when we have a pod like that, I will choose something like Nahab, or this good card here, this Nath of the Gilt Leaf. So Nath of the Gilt Leaf is a really, really powerful card in the multiplayer format. And in Standard, it never really saw play. I didn't play during Lorwyn. Maybe people can actually see if this card did see it. But it's just because it's too weak when you only have one opponent. When you have multiple opponents, this card gets out of hand very, very quickly. And all of cards that actually target multiple players or multiple opponents are going to break this card and make this card just shine. So Nath the Gilt Leaf is a 5 mana 4/4 elf warrior, and at the beginning of your upkeep you may have target opponent discard a card at random. And then whenever an opponent discards a card, you can put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token in play. So this card gets really, really out of hand quickly with a ton of elf tokens, and so naturally the best way to build this deck is to kind of go a little bit of an elf tribal. I don't like going all out on elf tribal because I still like the discard aspect of it too, and a little bit of the control elements that Nath provides. So what I like about discard in especially Commander is a lot of times you have time to set up your discard, and you really capitalize on players that are trying to establish combos, because even if they utilize a lot of their first turn searching for combos, then Nath can rip those combos out of their hand. Usually if I see a player search up something, I'll use one of my discard spells and empty their hand, and then you get a little bit of value off of Nath, or a lot of value off of Nath. And so you're proactively stopping your opponents trying to do their game plan, and little by little these 1/1s can chip away. Or you can assemble your own degenerate combos with Nath. So let's just start off with the deck tech. The first thing let's talk about is just the discard package. So there are some goodies here. I need to update this deck. It's been a while. I think it's been since Hour of Devastation since I've added a card to this deck. So I need to look at Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan to see if there is any cards that would go great in Nath. But so far, we have cards like the Herald of Anguish. This card is pretty good because at the beginning of your end step, each opponent discards a card. So you can see how the more opponents, the merrier. So you cast this on your turn, and then at your end step, if you have 4 opponents, that's 4 elves that are coming into play, and 4 cards that are going to the graveyard, not just the 1 card if you have 1 opponent. And you can also sacrifice an artifact to have target creature get -2/2. That barely ever comes into effect in this type of deck. We're just doing that for the recurring discard that the Herald of Anguish can allow. The best card in the deck that combos with Nath is definitely Sadistic Hypnotist, because it's got the perfect pair with it. So Nath puts in 1/1s, Sadistic Hypnotist sacrifices them to have an opponent discard 2 cards. If you have these 2 out, your opponents have no more hand. Now this can only be done as a sorcery, but if on your turn you will empty your opponent's hands with Sadistic Hypnotist and Nath the Gilt Leaf. Usually my degenerate draws are when I have both of these bad boys out, and then my opponents are the only way they can get out of the situation is to top deck their way out of it. So then we have the Nezumi Bone Reader, which is the a worse Sadistic Hypnotist, but also is pretty solid because it sacrifice a creature, target player discards a card. So for each black mana you have, and I've got some cool little combos with this I'll be talking about. One of them is a card called Earthcraft. I'll show it when it comes up because then you can use the token that comes into play to untap a swamp, and then you have the infinite with Nezumi. So here's an Earthcraft. I'll show it here. So Nezumi with Nath with Earthcraft is another way to basically get rid of all of your opponent's cards out of their hand. So it definitely deserves a spot in this deck. The next card is the Anvil of Boganan. This is also one that helps you with your card draw. Each player skips his or her discard phase. During each player's draw phase, that player draws an additional card and then chooses and discards a card. So it is kind of like a Howling Moon, except they're not going to they don't get a keep, or actually they get it. They have to discard a card from their hand. So it's going to get you that elf. And then it starts on your opponent's first turn, so it also helps you dig through some things. So I like the Anvil of Boganan as a renewable resource with Nath. The next card is the Capital Punishment. This is a very, very powerful card in the Conspiracy. Has Council of Nobles starting with you. Each player votes for death or taxes. Each opponent sacrifices a creature for each death and discards a card for each taxes. So you can whatever one suits you the most. That's what you're and usually in this is perfect for Nath. Nath needs to get rid of threats on the board as well as threats of the hand. And so it's usually the best. You get a vote for one. So if you want to guarantee a creature like a hexproof or indestructible creature gets sacked, there you go. If your opponents then vote for a bunch of creatures being sacked, then everything is going to be sacked. Since each opponent, so this doesn't affect you. It doesn't hit your own Nath, which is really, really powerful. Then Words of the Waste. This one's a pretty decent card because it says the next time you draw a card this turn, each opponent discards a card. So you're turning one of your draws into a discard for all of your opponents. So again, this can actually get you a lot of cards. Don't worry about the card draw here. Of not drawing a card. When you need to empty out your opponent's hands, there's not a lot of cards that are better than Words of Waste. I have included a Mind Twist. Typically, I don't like these type of cards. Like I don't have Hymn to Torak in this because I don't like things that only affect one player. But if there's a player I know I need to empty their hand very, very quickly, Mind Twist is in here, and it's not a bad card post Nath. When you have Nath, or I'll show you there's an Honorary Nath in this deck as well. To get you some value out of it, Mind Twist is good because it's the most efficient use of mana for discarding a particular player discarding a card. Okay, so then we have a fun card here. Maybe this doesn't belong in competitive, but this is Chain of Smog. Target player discards 2 cards from his or her hand. That player may copy the spell and choose new targets. So it's fine if they target you, you just you just make them discard 2 cards again. So or another player. So you're going to get the more value out of Chain of Smog. You're going to be the deck that is actually using discard. Siphon Mind is a very powerful one because it says for each player discards a card. Each other player discards a card. You draw a card for each card this way. So you're going to get a lot of card draw out of the Siphon Mind and a lot of 1/1 elves. Larceny. This one works perfectly also with Nath because Nath is putting out 1/1s, and Larceny is saying whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, they're discarding it, and then it's generating another elf. So another very, very powerful card in the discard. Dark Deal. Each player discards their hand, all the cards in their hand, and then draws that many -1. This is one of the best ones to have a bunch of opponents discard a ton of cards at once. Then we have the Ill-Gotten Gains. You have to exile, but each player discards his or her hand, then returns up to 3 cards from his or her graveyard to his hand. This one a lot of times sets me up because I only need like 3 cards in my hand after that, and I'm getting a lot of. It's very similar to a Dark Deal, except instead of top decking stuff, you get stuff out of the graveyard. So I do like the Ill-Gotten Gains. The Unnerve is also quite strong just because it's one of the few ones that actually can do this type of ability. I'm sure if a better card gets printed, then this can be replaced. But for now, 4 mana to have each opponent discard 2 cards and is pretty powerful. And then a Smallpox just for ways to have a little bit of a control element. Usually you don't have to worry about a creature because you'll have one. Sack a land, and each player loses a life and discards a card. So it's another one that each player affects each player to get some upside from it. So then I talked about how this is also an Elf Tribal. So the Elf Tribal, we're going to run kind of a lot of the key staples here. Essence Warrens I find pretty good. This isn't a must in the deck, but if anyone's playing an aggro deck, this can help you gain some life or mitigate some life loss. We have the Wildwood Herald, which goes in Tutors up after it dies. And you saw with Sadistic Sacrament, or Sadistic, what was I calling it? Sadistic Hypnotist, the Wirewood Herald, there's a lot of sack outlets in this deck, and we'll show some other coming up. So this is a really good card. That's why Elvish Visionary is in here as well. It pairs perfect as a way to, if Nath gets taken care of, for example, it's at least a way we can start putting out some tokens, and it pumps up our tokens. The Reclamation Sage destroys an artifact or enchantment, perfect for any commander deck, as well as the Fauna Shaman helps us discard a creature card to find specific creatures, particularly Sadistic Hypnotist is a great one to get, and some of our win cons are creatures, and we'll show those in a second. Wood Elves 2 hooks up really well with our Sacrifice outlet, plus ramps us up. For an Emissary, same thing. Elvish Archdruid pumps up our Elves, plus generates more mana. You can see how much mana you can generate with this card. Is pretty bonkers. Same thing with the Wirewood Chandler, and the Priest of Titania. So we have all of kind of the Elf Lords here. The Birchlore Ranger, and the other one is we have it here, the Heritage Druid. Both of these are make your tokens go on crack, because you can actually tap them, even though they have Summoning Sickness to add mana, and so you can generate a ton of mana with your newly acquired little elf tokens. The Tree Speaker can then make them tap for more as time goes on. If you get this up to a 5 levels, then all elves can tap for 2 mana, so all your elf warriors that you generate. Deathrite Shaman is just really good because there will be lots of stuff in lands in the graveyard for this to add mana to mana pool, and it can start draining your opponent. It also helps you exile problematic cards out of your opponent's graveyard. Then we have the Elvish, we have this this package here. The Mystic, the Llanowar Elf, the Findhorn, the Elves of Deep Shadow, and the Arbor Elf. Ramping up is very, very key in this because we play a really low land count, and so we want these turn 1 elves to come out so they can get to our Nath quicker. So that's kind of the elf package. Pretty standard there. So let's go on to the card draw. The way that we fill back up our hand after we've kind of discarded kind of our clamp, Skull Clamp is just really, really solid with this deck, as it allows you to draw 2 cards per elf. We have the Driven to Despair. We're flooding the board with elf tokens, so Driven's going to draw us many cards. And then the Despair, we can aftermath it to have, when it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So you can see that works perfect with your token generation. The Asylum Visitor, once your opponents are out of cards, is going to allow you to draw some cards, and you can actually mat this in. You have a lot of cards that make you discard a card as well, like the Anvil of Boganan, for example. You can discard the Asylum Visitor. We have a Temple Bell to fill back up. Each player, not only our own, but each player is going to have to draw a card. And this, what sometimes happens like after a board wipe, and then the board's reset, no one has a hand. Temple Bell's great, because then you can get Nath out and start actually getting some more tokens back to do what you want to do with that card. We have the Guess Grimoire. Guess Grimoire says whenever an opponent discards a card from their hand, you can draw a card. And the Waste Not. This is the honorary Nath in here. This is the second best card. A lot of times when you tutor, you'll want to get a Waste Not, because this card just goes crazy by creating zombie tokens, by adding mana, or by drawing cards. So Waste Not is yeah, definitely one of the best cards in this deck, one of the points of playing this deck. So what do we get out of our tokens? Here's some other things that are really, really value, just a good renewable sack outlet. The Earthcraft turns them all into Birds of Paradise, basically, in this deck, is you can either tap for a black or a blue. And what I like about Earthcraft over Cryptolith Rite, and I don't use a Cryptolith Rite in this deck, I only use Earthcraft because it gets around Summoning Sickness. We have the Evolutionary Leap, which allows you to sack a token or any creature at that point to then reveal cards to the top of your library until you find a creature. The Mind Slash, which makes an opponent discard a card by sacrificing. So again, with this and Earthcraft and Nath, you basically can get all of your cards out of your opponent's hands. And then Attrition as a little bit of a control amount just to sacrifice to get rid of non-black creatures. Very, very good card. Then we have the Tutors. Well, we'll go to the other control elements here. The other control elements that I've decided to use in this deck is the City of Solitude. I like this card because if you play this, you are very, very susceptible to instant speed stuff when people try to do stuff in response. A lot of times when I'm ready to go off, I don't want to be interacted with, so City of Solitude is the best way to do it. I don't have a lot of stuff instant speed, very, very few ways that I actually do anything on my opponent's turn. In fact, a lot of my cards say activate this only as a sorcery, so City of Solitude usually affects me the least. We have a Dictate of Erebos and a Grave Pact because we are sacking a bunch of 1/1s all the time, and that gets rid of all those pesky hexproof indestructible cards. A Pernicious Deed when we need like a good board reset. And Smokestack works really well in this deck because you're creating a lot of 1/1 fodder for the Smokestack, and then pretty soon with your opponents having no cards in hand, you can then start making their top decks worse and worse as you can start making them sack their lands. So Smokestack's really, really potent here. I do have a Planeswalker package in this deck. I use 4 Planeswalkers. First one being Freya. Freya is a great card because it gets rid of pesky artifacts or enchantments, and then it gives you a little bit of a draw outlet once you get it big enough, and it can just put out some 1/1s. Then we have Garrick. Garrick's one of our alternate win conditions. You can get everything +3/+3, and if you have enough of your 1/1 tokens, that can win the game. Liliana is our tutor card. Also can make a player discard a card, and then eventually it's another win con. If you get up to 8, you can then put all creature cards from all graveyards into play under your control. If I had a doubling season, I might put doubling season in this deck because I think it might have enough worth in here, but I think if I went doubling season, I'd go a little higher on stuff with creates tokens and things like that. Then we have Liliana the Veil. This one is really good because it has each player discards a card, and then target player sacks a creature, and then the ult's pretty decent too, to shut down a particular player. Alright, so I do use this Soul Ring in this deck. We have a couple of tutors. First category is the land tutors, because we'll get to land tutors in a second. The first tutor is just hard tutors. Diabolical Intent is really good because you have a lot of 1/1s to sacrifice. Sadistic, same thing. You can exploit it. We used to have like a Nim Death Mantle in here, as well as the artifact that taps to put in a token of a creature that's been exiled underneath it, as those on a stick. But I am cutting them just because there was a lot of artifact hate in the meta, and I didn't like getting blown out by that kind of stuff. We do have a Demonic Tutor and a Court of Calling. So I don't use a lot of tutors in this deck. I easily could, but this has just been my preference with this particular deck. Again, we do have like the elf that can tutor things up, and the evolutionary leap that can eventually get stuff as well. So speaking of like the Nim Death Metal and the other cards that used to have kind of like on a stick type effects, Skullwinder and Entomber Exarch. Entomber Exarch's like a panic button to get back a Sadistic Hypnotist if I need to, or I can still at least make my opponent get rid of a card. So I like the abilities on the Entomber. And then the Skullwinder is really cool because a lot of times you can have an opponent put back a card from their graveyard to their hand and then make them discard it. So it's like putting back so you get back a card and make your opponent discard a card. So I do like the Skullwinder over like Eternal Witness in this deck. But Eternal Witness is also a good card that could easily go in this deck. Then we have the the land tutors. Lands are very, very important here because we have a lot of awesome utility lands. The first one being Crop Rotation, and this basically lets you sack a land to go get anything. Expedition Map lets you get any land. Hour of Promise lets you get any 2 lands. I don't even run deserts in this deck. But this card is so powerful. If you're not running this in your green commander deck, especially if it's a green-black deck, man, you're a noob. Every green-black deck should have an Hour of Promise because black already has a crazy, crazy land package. Then we have the Sylvan Scrying. Same thing goes against any land. And the Tempt with Discovery, if everyone's stupid enough to tempt, you can easily go crazy with the Tempt of Discovery. This at least allows you to go get one specific land, though, if no one does tempt. So you get a land for everyone that does tempt, and one for yourself. So the land package is pretty self-explanatory. We have one of the green-black lands for every basic type, basically. We have the Overgrown Tomb, the Woodland Cemetery, the Command Tower, the Tainted Woods, the Blossoming Marsh, Landor Waste, Verdant Catacombs, and Golgari Rotform. Yes, I could run more fetch lands, but I think that's a no-no. I wish they'd change the rules in Commander. I think it's ridiculous that people just run a bunch of all these. I think the color identity should definitely be these two. That is a color identity. Come on. People that argue like these rules lowering, like the definitions in Commander are kind of stupid. It's kind of the same thing I think Burnt Offering should be able to be used in black or red deck, or I mean a black-red or just a black deck, because I think you shouldn't be punished by the options. But anyway, the utility lands though with this deck, Bajuko Ba can get rid of anyone that's running a reanimation strategy. You don't want to feed them, so that's a panic button you can go get to then exile your opponent's graveyard. The Gaia Reach Sanitarium is awesome. They draw a card, then discard it. So if your opponents are out of cards in their hand, this is a great way to make them draw a card, then immediately discard it. The Thespian Stage can copy a bunch of lands here that are really good. Can't do the legendary land, unfortunately. We have the focus. We have the Wirewood Lodge. Let's get rid of this. Maybe we'll focus now. The Wirewood Lodge says add 1 to your mana pool and then untap an elf. So you can see with our mana dorks that can do crazy stuff. It's a good way to untap them. We have the Deserted Temple, which can untap target land because we have some broken lands here like the Ancient Tomb. And this combo, the Urborg Tomb Yawgmoth and the Cobble Coffers. This is a way sweet card. This one is in a different language, but it says add black to your mana pool for each swamp you control, Urborg Tomb Yawgmoth, turns everything into a swamp, including Cobble Coffer, so you just add a ton of mana to your mana pool. And Mika Core is another way to make people draw cards too when you get to that point. So that's the land package, and that's why it's very important to have a lot of ways to tutor up lands. Last but not least is the finishers. These are what I consider the kind of the hard finishers in the deck. I only run 3. The first being, of course, in the Elf strategy, the Draga Warcaller. This you can multi-kick for a bazillion. This deck is so good at generating mana, and then you kick it for 10, and then all your elves are 11/11s, and they swing in for lethal to all of them. Very easy to do. Then we have the Azzurri Renegade Leader, same thing. Just pump up the elves to get +2 and trample. Do that a number of times. You're going to win. And one of the best cards ever printed for EDH, in my opinion, especially for decks that can generate a lot of mana, is a Torment of Hailfire. This has a double whammy in this deck because it can also you've already ripped out all your opponent's hand, so they don't even have the option a lot of time to discard cards. So, and if they do have the option to discard cards, like you have to use this early on and people want to sack permanents, that's a way to get like Nath or Waste Not online. So definitely the Torment of Hailfire. This is a card that I'm actually be brewing around with Rivals of Ixalan with the newest an amulet is what it's called, where you exile different cards of different curved mana costs, and you can add a crap ton of mana to your mana pool. I think this is the best payoff so far for it. So I'm loving this Torment of Hailfire in this particular deck, and it's just insane. There are so many commander decks that just go crazy with Torment of Hailfire. Then the rest of the deck is just filled up with the basic lands. So I go heavier on the forests than I do on the swamps. I'll try to have a full deck list up, but Nath has been one of my favorite decks to play in Commander for sure. It is a very powerful card. It has anything that works around discard is going to be pretty good. One of the best ways to, if you have a lot of people that play a lot of wombo combo type decks, the best way to stop them is just make sure they don't have anything in their hand. Then you don't have to worry about anything that could come out. It's just gone. So I like to, again, the more opponents, the merrier. And I love these type of cards, especially in EDH, to say each player, each opponent, because they just get infinitely better as you add more players to the game. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this list. We'll have Atali will not be done by this, by the way. Atali will be a fully edited, all the bells and whistles type deck that you saw with Balthor and King Makar. So I hope you enjoyed those videos, and I hope you will enjoyed this video, and hope you enjoy Atali. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.